Sevhead Creative at sevhead.com presents the audio web series Epyphany, Born from the Sea, written and produced by Don Sev Severance, and narrated by Professor Proteus. Epyphany, Born from the Sea is an exciting and sensuous adventure set in the not-too-distant future, where the birth of Epyphany, the first real mermaid, marks the beginning of a new epoch in the fragile future of Earth's inhabitants. Rescued from the hands of a greedy privateer and raised on the secret island of Oojai, Epyphany is an exotic creature of unparalleled beauty, intelligence, and power. For 20 years she thrives, swimming in the shadow of the gold tower under the loving guidance of Bliss, an enigmatic mystic determined to teach her the skills she will need to fulfill the prophecy of the silver tablets. Epyphany and her small tribe of gifted sea creatures continue to live an idyllic life on their peaceful island until the day Epyphany chooses to save the life of Thoreau, an internationally renowned oceanographer and multi-millionaire inventor. This fateful decision sets off a chain of events that places Epyphany at the center of a battle to save our polluted planet from imminent destruction, and forces her to accept the overwhelming task of guiding humankind through the transition into a new era of unprecedented diversity. Before we begin, I would like you to consider this. If evolution is defined as a change in the genetic makeup of a population over time, then we might propose a case for hyper-evolution, a genetic anomaly that allows for the birth of a creature specifically adapted to the rapid environmental changes occurring in real time. Chapter 1. And so it begins. A small shiver ran through her as she slid off the smooth, warm stone that had been her bed. She dropped quietly into the bay, barely making a ripple as she swam slowly toward the shore. Vaguely aware of a low-frequency hum emanating from an unknown source several miles away, Epyphany rolled effortlessly onto her back, gazing up at the sky, lost in thought. She didn't notice Reefer flying from the shore to meet her. He swooped down, passing just above her head, and let out a delighted squawk as her startled gasp echoed across the water. "It's not often I can sneak up on you. You must have been far, far away." "Yes, I was. As far away as that sound. Do you hear it?" "No, remember? No one hears like you do." "True. Could you do me a favor and swing out past the barrier reef? I'm picking up an odd vibration." Reefer quickly returned. "There's something you need to see." With a growing sense of apprehension, Epyphany swam out of the bay. Reefer flew ahead as she navigated around the barrier reef and into the open sea. Suddenly, she stopped cold at the sight before her. About half a mile from the reef, a very large yacht was drifting slowly in the deep water. Epyphany had encountered many ships in her travels, but none approached the beauty and elegance of this vessel. It seemed more like a creature of the sea than a mere boat. Its long, slender hull mimicked the streamlined curves of her dolphin friends, and the front was raised slightly by two sleek silver pontoons, giving it the illusion of speed, even though it moved at less than 10 knots. This was undoubtedly the source of the hum she had noticed upon awakening. It seemed unattended, almost as if it were waiting for orders. There was no sign of anyone on board. In all her years on Oojai, Epyphany had never seen a boat this close to her island. Questions buzzed in her mind as she swam nearer, her instincts urging caution. She signaled to Reefer to fly farther out and scan the area. That familiar shiver ran down her spine again, impossible to ignore. She circled the boat, trying to gauge its purpose. Minutes passed, her unease growing with each lap around the vessel. Suddenly, Reefer's voice broke through her thoughts, his message urgent. There's a man. Where is he? Is he alone? Yes, he seems to be. He's barely treading water. He needs help. When necessary, Epyphany could skim across the water faster than Reefer could fly. As soon as she reached deeper waters, she felt it, the human's distress, his exhaustion. She closed the distance within minutes, only pausing when the reality of her actions struck her. Epyphany had been taught the grave consequences of underestimating humans' reaction to any creature they didn't understand. Bliss had shared enough personal stories to make those lessons stick. Whenever Epyphany had come close to people, she'd made sure to remain unseen, but this moment felt different. Something deep inside compelled her to break those rules, to risk everything. After treading water for what felt like an eternity, Thoreau was beginning to lose hope. His mind spiraled into self-reproach. How could I be so foolish, he thought. Years of experience on every kind of boat, in every conceivable weather, and I fall off this perfectly stable vessel in a dead calm. The absurdity gnawed at him. Yet, even as he tried to dismiss it as delirium setting in, he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, had pushed him. Earlier, before checking on the pontoon's hydraulic system, Thoreau had directed his ship to idle slowly around the perimeter of the atoll. The fascinating island hadn't appeared on any maps, nor had he found any records of it in his research. It was a stroke of luck, or was it? His course had inexplicably drifted during the night. Maybe one of the pontoons had shifted, though even that seemed far-fetched. The more he pondered it, the more the situation felt shrouded in mystery. One moment he had been crossing the pontoon. The next, he found himself floating in the ocean. Once he regained his bearings, Thoreau immediately tried to reach his ship. Although the vessel was only a few yards ahead, it moved just fast enough to slip out of his grasp, drifting steadily farther away. With a heavy heart, he watched as his beautiful boat vanished into the evening haze. He let out a moan, fighting back tears of frustration as the purr of its turbine faded into the distance. Miles from any shipping lane, he knew the chances of rescue were slim. Thoreau's survival instincts kicked in. Conserving every ounce of energy, he managed to stay afloat through the long, dark night. When the sky began to lighten, he was thankful to see another sunrise. Though he felt strong enough to tread water for a few more hours, the looming threats of the blistering sun, hunger, and dehydration weighed heavily on his mind. Something in the sky caught his attention. A large bird was swooping closer. At the same moment, he became aware of an eerie presence. Thoreau felt an unusual shift in the current around him and immediately thought of sharks. He thought to himself, and here I was, afraid I might drown. Suddenly, the water around him stilled, an inexplicable calm spreading through the waves. An overwhelming sense of peace enveloped him, persisting even as he noticed something break the surface a few yards away, gliding slowly toward him. The ocean seemed to pulse in sync with his heartbeat. He felt as if he had become one with the sea and sky. For a moment he closed his eyes, surrendering to the sensation. When he opened them again, Thoreau found himself staring directly into the eyes of another, no more than 6 feet away. Confusion gripped him. He knew he should be afraid, should scream or swim away, but his instincts were dulled by a consuming curiosity. The creature's gaze held him captive, gentle yet powerful, and he felt a sensation like music, vibrating through his mind and body, a non-verbal message that reassured him. He was not in danger. Hypnotized by the creature's glistening gold-green eyes, Thoreau felt an overwhelming compassion radiating from her. She drifted closer, and he struggled to break free from her gaze. Sensing his unease, she closed her eyes, turning away. then extended one hand towards him. He recoiled at the sight of her hand, 3 long, elegant fingers and an elongated thumb connected by a thin membrane, with nails that tapered into curved talons. He braced for an iron grip, and realizing he had no other choice, he hesitantly reached out. As their fingers touched, a profound realization washed over Thoreau. His life would never be the same. An unspoken fear within him dissolved, replaced by a deep desire to understand. This mysterious creature exists, he thought, and she has chosen to save me. Then Thoreau lost consciousness. As Epiphany approached Thoreau, she was surprised by his hesitation, especially from a man so close to drowning. In her previous brief encounters with humans, Epyphany had always managed to remain undetected, so she was certain this was the first time anyone had truly seen her. She paused, considering the consequences of meeting a human face to face. If she let him drown, her world would remain unchanged, safe in its isolation. Yet something compelled her to reach out. With Thoreau held securely under one arm, Epiphany swam effortlessly back toward the bay, heading straight for the lagoon's entrance. As she glanced up to signal reefer, her eyes caught sight of Bliss standing atop a cliff, silhouetted against the golden morning sun. Though small in stature, with her majestic spirit and mysterious powers, Bliss projected a much larger presence. Epiphany's thoughts raced. What now? What will I do with this human? Bliss had warned her repeatedly about the dangers of making contact with humans. Knowing what Bliss would say, Epiphany hoped to delay that inevitable conversation for as long as she could. Distracted by her thoughts, Epiphany didn't notice that Bliss wasn't the only one who had been watching her swim into the bay with her mysterious companion. As she neared the entrance to the lagoon, Dali and Magnum appeared on either side, silently joining her. She acknowledged her friends with a nod, though doubt still gnawed at her. Had she done the right thing? Yet through the fog of uncertainty, a flicker of light seemed to beckon her. Somehow, she knew there had been no other choice. There was a purpose, something she and this man were meant to fulfill. The trio moved swiftly across the lagoon and into a small bay, approaching the narrow inlet and waterfalls that concealed the hidden cove. The roar of cascading water enveloped them as they slipped into the shadows of overhanging branches, lush vegetation, and flowering vines. Inside the cove, a few members of the tribe emerged to greet them. Unfamiliar with humans, they kept a cautious distance as Epiphany led the way toward the cavern. With Thoreau unconscious in her arms, Epiphany faced a dilemma. The underwater tunnel to the cavern temple was a challenge even for a well-trained swimmer, requiring a single breath to traverse. But with Thoreau's weakened state, she had no way of knowing if he could survive the journey. She decided her only option was to infuse him with extra oxygen. Epiphany had never been this close to a human male before. Holding Thoreau tightly against her body brought a sensation unlike any she had felt with Bliss. Bliss was the only human she had ever touched, but Bliss wasn't a typical human. From a distance, humans appeared light and fragile, yet this man felt solid, his size matching hers, if one didn't account for her long, powerful tail. His skin had a fascinating texture, steely yet elastic. Despite being a land creature, he seemed well proportioned for swimming, perhaps the very reason he had survived the long hours adrift. Now she had to push air into his lungs, nourish his brain with oxygen, and hope he would survive the brief underwater journey. Spinning in and out of consciousness, Thoreau was aware of being propelled swiftly through the water. He could sense great strength and tenderness simultaneously, as if his confused mind was being massaged and lightly probed. Feeling a strange delight, he thought he might be smiling but doubted the message had made it to his lips. Suddenly, the grip on him shifted. Through his swollen eyelids, he caught sight of an alien yet beautiful face coming towards him. He wasn't frightened, just overwhelmed. In the next instant, his mouth was engulfed by the most sensuous lips he had ever known, full, soft, and moist, with an ineffable taste. Sweet fruit and chocolate, lime, pop rocks, and butterscotch. He wondered who or what was kissing him, and why. Epiphany moved him gently in front of her, placing her mouth over his. Thoreau's eyes opened. He twitched slightly, then relaxed in her arms. Their eyes met. Their tongues touched. Epiphany exhaled, Thoreau gasped, and then she pulled him close, disappearing behind the waterfall and down into the dark tunnel. Chapter 2. The Cavern Temple. Still clutching Thoreau tightly, Epyphany soared out of the tunnel, gliding effortlessly across the surface of the temple pool to the center, then gently guided him up the smooth ramp leading to the base of the gold tower. Once she was certain he was comfortable, she slowly circled the pool, trying to clear her mind and regain her composure. What had she done? The weight of her actions settled heavily on her. She had defied the most crucial rule that Bliss had drilled into her since childhood. No human contact. And not just contact, but physical contact. The memory of their kiss sent a shiver through her, one she quickly suppressed. Worse yet, she'd brought him here, into the heart of the most sacred and secret temple on earth. Thoreau, meanwhile, barely had time to process what was happening. One moment he was submerged. The next, he was sliding on his stomach up a stone ramp. When he finally came to a stop, he rolled onto his back, blinking in astonishment at his surroundings. An enormous cave? A tower of light? He thought he heard a voice, but he couldn't tell if it was real or just in his mind. Nothing made sense. His body trembled, he coughed twice, and then overwhelmed he lost consciousness. For 20 years, Bliss had educated, guided, and trained Epiphany in the ways of the modern world. Not a day passed without warnings about the dangers of direct human contact. Epiphany had been exposed to the harsh realities of the so-called civilized world and trained to navigate the myriad threats humans posed. But in all of Bliss's teachings, in all the futures she had envisioned, nothing had prepared her for this. Epiphany's mind raced. What would she tell Bliss? How could she explain something she didn't fully understand herself? As the thought gripped her, she turned to check on Thoreau. Then froze. Bliss stood with her back against the smooth, glistening wall of the tower, Thoreau at her feet, facing Epiphany. Her face hidden in the shadows, her demeanor enigmatic and mysterious. Time stretched as they stood in silence. Then, without a word, Bliss gestured for Epiphany to approach. Stepping into the warm, golden light, Bliss smiled. One day later. Thoreau awoke to the sound of moving water. He found himself in a vast cavern, its walls made of smooth, luminous stone. As he stood, unsteady at first, he gazed upward, and then had to close his eyes, shake his head, and look again. Nothing in his experience prepared him for what he saw. Towering above him stood a sleek, modern spire, appearing as if forged entirely from gold. Its intricate design glimmered in the ambient glow of the cavern walls. Turning slowly, Thoreau took in the cavern's otherworldly beauty. He stood on a small island surrounded by a large pool, itself encircled by smaller pools and inlets. Some pools steamed, others bubbled gently, and all were scattered with a splendid variety of exotic vegetation. His gaze followed a narrow stone bridge that arched subtly, connecting his island to the cave's perimeter. A short, sandy beach fringed one of the larger inlets, where a ramp or stairway led into the shadows. At first, Thoreau believed he was alone, but soon he felt eyes on him. A slight movement in the pool nearby caught his attention. Then he heard a sudden blast of air. Further out, water sprayed upward, followed by a quiet gurgle to his left and a squawk from somewhere near the cavern wall. His head buzzed, his heart raced, not in fear, but in heightened alertness. In his attempt to make sense of his surroundings, he had momentarily forgotten the events that led him to this mysterious place. Suddenly, his body relaxed. A memory surfaced, the moment before he fell from his ship. Then he heard a voice break through his thoughts, pleasant and strangely familiar. "Hello, Thoreau. Welcome to Oojai." The voice seemed to come from all around him, neither loud nor echoing, but omnipresent. He looked up. Atop the gold tower, standing motionless like a bronze statue, there appeared a small athletic woman, her features enchanting and ageless. Like the tower, she was a mysterious vision, bathed in shimmering gold light and smiling down at him. A soft murmur behind him caught his attention, and when he turned back, she stood before him. She spoke again, her voice as soft and fluid as the golden light around them. "Thoreau. I like that name. It suits you. I trust you are feeling better. This is a healing place." He realized that despite the physical and emotional strain of the past 24 hours, he felt incredibly strong and alert. It was still a bit of a blur, but he didn't recall mentioning his name to anyone. "I am Bliss. You were rescued by Epyphany, and the sounds you've been hearing are from the tribe. You will meet them soon. We welcome you as an honored guest, and we will help you understand Oojai and its importance to the world we all share. I believe that you, above all others, may be the one to help guide us into the transition. Keep your mind and your heart open, Thoreau." Before he could respond, the sound of wings distracted him. A large bird swooped down in front of him, landing just a few feet away. He turned back. Bliss had vanished. Thoreau found himself staring into the eyes of the largest bird he had ever seen. Despite his extensive study of the oceans and their creatures, he had never encountered anything like this. It was a pelican, a species he recognized, but it stood nearly 5 feet tall. A bird that size would have a wingspan of over 12 feet. It didn't seem threatening. If anything, its eyes seemed to smile at him. Thoreau was beginning to believe that anything was possible on this island. Despite its imposing size, the pelican had a comical demeanor. Its grey and white feathers, oversized webbed feet, and short, sturdy legs added to its whimsical appearance. A floppy plume of white feathers atop its head reminded him of an 80s punk rocker. The bird's dark grey beak was sharp and formidable, yet its lower bill and pouch glowed with a striking reddish-orange hue. The bird stood there, oddly peaceful, yet with a definite sense of purpose. As they locked eyes, Thoreau felt as though the bird was sizing him up. "I see you've met Reefer." He turned. Epyphany sat on the shore across the pool at the foot of the bridge. Though she was too far away to cast a spell with her eyes, her figure had nearly the same effect. Even from a distance, her long, lithe form and alien beauty were captivating. "We haven't been formally introduced," Thoreau replied, "but I get the sense he already knows me better than I know him." "That's probably true," Epyphany said, a hint of a smile in her voice. "Reefer is a very good judge of character." She slipped into the pool, moving gracefully towards Thoreau and the tower. When she reached him, she spoke softly. "I'm sure you have many questions. Sit down. I'll answer a few now, and many more as I show you the wonders of Oojai. To start, know this. You are not in danger from any of the tribe, unless, of course, you try to harm us. Thoreau was at a loss. His world and everything he had once known had been completely upended. A lesser man might have lost his grip on reality by now, but his experience and scientific training kept him grounded. He needed clarity. He needed to find the right question. He sat at the edge of the warm pool, feet dangling in the water, and leaned forward to meet Epiphany's enchanting gaze. "Is this reality?" he asked. Epiphany blinked, taken aback by his question. Born and raised here, she had never doubted the world she knew, the beauty of Oojai, the comforting presence of bliss, and the familiarity of the tribe. But now, seeing the world through Thoreau's eyes, she grasped the enormity of what he was experiencing. "If you're asking whether this is a dream or a hallucination," she said slowly, "the answer is no. Though this island may seem otherworldly, it exists in the same reality as yours. It's just hidden. Powers beyond my understanding have allowed you to find us." Thoreau nodded, absorbing her words. "Then can you tell me where I am? Why no one has discovered this place? How you and Bliss came to be here? And what you plan to do with me?" Epiphany smiled softly. "All valid questions. I'll answer what I can. You're still in the Indian Ocean. We haven't been discovered because the world isn't ready for us. Bliss rescued me when I was just a newborn and brought me here. As for Bliss's origins, I'm still not certain. And what we plan to do with you—" She paused, a sly smile tugging at her lips. "Well, for starters, I'd like another oxygen exchange." Unprepared for her response, Thoreau hesitated. He suppressed a pleasant shudder as he recalled the feeling of her mouth on his. Was she asking for a kiss? Before he could clarify, Bliss appeared, breaking the tension. "Perhaps it's time to introduce Thoreau to the tribe," Bliss suggested. They crossed a bridge, with Reefer waddling behind, his webbed feet slapping the damp stone. As they reached the perimeter, Thoreau noticed paths winding around the pool, leading to a narrow stone pier jutting into deep water. Familiar sounds reached his ears as the water stirred. Bliss reached behind her, pulling an instrument from a black bamboo case slung around her waist. She raised the swall to her lips, its time-worn shell glimmered in the reflected light. Her fingers danced across its surface, and as she blew into the enchanting instrument, a mesmerizing blend of sound and shifting colors filled the air. Ripples broke the pool's surface, and various shapes began to emerge. Bliss lowered her instrument and smiled. "Thoreau, meet a few members of our exceptional tribe." Still in a daze from the hypnotic music, Thoreau tried to connect each name with the creatures before him. "Dali," Bliss introduced, gesturing to a large, bottle-nosed dolphin with piercing eyes. "Magnum," she continued, nodding toward a menacing alligator over 20 feet long, with a forked tail. Speed, Thoreau recognized immediately as an oversized leatherback sea turtle built for speed with his streamlined shell and powerful flippers. Zip. A flash of iridescent blue-green caught Thoreau's eye. In sharp contrast to the others, this one was a small, nimble flying fish. Irie. A stunning blue sailfish swam by, her sail fin raised like a banner. "And you'll meet Storm soon," Bliss added, her voice taking on a note of reverence. "He's a bit too large to join us in the cavern." On Oojai, Thoreau realized large had an entirely new meaning. He was curious about meeting Storm. Bliss turned to him. "Are you strong enough for another tunnel dive back to the cove? Dali can give you a ride if you're uncertain." Thoreau chuckled. "I don't remember much about the first trip, So, yes, I'll take Dali's offer. Wise choice. Dali nodded, his eyes gleaming with intelligence. Sensing a subtle shift in Epiphany's demeanor, he was glad to keep an eye on this human. Wading into the pool, Thoreau grasped Dali's dorsal fin and took a deep breath. With the tribe surrounding him, they dove into the tunnel. The dark green stone walls, smooth but for varied shallow indentations, glided past them. Dim, natural light illuminated their way, the same mysterious glow that filled the cavern. As they neared the tunnel's end, Thoreau braced himself for the blinding sunlight, but instead they emerged into the gentle glow of a setting sun. The hidden cove, nestled deep within a canyon, was a canvas of color and shadow. Above, the moon and stars began to peek through the fading golden light, and a mist rose from the jagged shoreline. I thank you, and Sev thanks you, for listening to the first installment of this series, Epiphany, Born from the Sea. There are many more chapters to come, so we hope you subscribe and hit the bell so you can continue to join Epiphany and her tribe as they navigate the stormy seas into the transition.